Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This panel is going to give an example of how an enlarged EU can work very efficiently, because we have an enormous panel with 5 speakers, but we're all going to be incredibly brief and pithy, so there'll be time for discussion. Could I invite my panelists, please, to join us on the platform? And while they're doing so, let me say just 2 things. First of all, the most urgent and important thing, the precondition for a successful enlargement, is that we enable Ukraine to win this war. And that means getting arms and ammunition to Ukraine in the next few weeks. Unless we can secure an independent, sovereign, secure Ukraine, there's not going to be a successful enlargement. The second thing to say is that the EU that we have today, with 27 member states, from Lisbon to Tallinn and Helsinki to Athens, is something we have never before had in European history. We've never before had so many countries in the same political, economic and security communities. And many, many times people have told us that it was impossible. In the 1990s and the 2000s, you couldn't take in a large, poor, messy, largely agrarian country into the European Union. That was Poland. And what a success it has been. So we can do it, but obviously it's a challenging process. We're going to start by my asking questions of each of the panelists, and then we'll have time for Q&A. I'm going to proceed from east to west, and I hope the panelists will forgive me if I don't introduce them at length. You all know who they are, and you have the program. So if I may start with you, Madam President, and ask the simplest but most essential question: why is membership of the EU so important for Georgia?
One word: it's a necessity. Security, necessity, and it's the only perspective for a country that by civilization has been sharing European values. But today maybe the main thing is security, and this necessity of security is the one that the EU should feel at the same time, because one could imagine what would be today's war in Ukraine if there was in the EU no Poland, no Baltic states, no Romania, no Bulgaria. So the former enlargement ensured, in fact, an additional security for the whole of the EU. And the next enlargement, our enlargement, will be an added security value for the European Union and for us. That's what is solidarity and shared values. And we have a very important, at the same time, security issue in common, which we do not talk about enough, which is the Black Sea. And what the Russia is doing right now is what, in fact, it announced in 2007, that it would not let the West get into the Black Sea. And after 2007, what happened? Georgia, 2008, the coast of the Black Sea, Crimea, main post on the Black Sea, and then the war in Ukraine. So it has announced what it was going to do, and it's doing it. So I think it's in the utmost interest of the European Union, and of course for Georgia, for our security and for our connectivity with Europe, to prevent Russia to become the exclusive power in the Black Sea, which it's trying to do. And that is important for the future also, for the communications that are going to be so important in the coming years and decades. For security of transport, of energy, we have to prevent that.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm sure that Olga Stefanishna would agree with every word of that, also from Ukraine's point of view. Olga, I mean, there are kind of 3 reforms we need to talk about, aren't there? There's reform inside Ukraine, preparing for EU membership. There's the reform of the EU that is needed to enable enlargement. And there's the reform of the actual process of enlargement, because what I think we can all agree is that we can't simply do it like it was done for the Western Balkans, which was less an accession process than a non-accession process, right? I mean, if you think of Northern Macedonia waiting since 2005. So say something to us, if you would, about those three reforms and the process as you're experiencing it now.
Well, thank you so much, Timothy. The process is definitely not fitting the spirit, and that's the major obstacle for us at this point of time. Because whatever is driving Ukraine closer to its membership in the European Union has a very clear ambiance, right? So we're not guided by just the process. We're not guided by procedure. We have not occasionally jumped into the enlargement process and been like in a circle of the other countries. Just 10 years ago, this day was the first day when protesters on the European Maidan in Ukraine were forcefully there was an attempt to forcefully destroy Maidan. This was the first day it started today, 10 years ago. And people were dying, wrapped in European flag. In fact, Radek was there on the European Maidan. So it's the ultimate choice of Ukrainian people. This is the war we are fighting for. And like nothing could force us unsee or unwind it. So which means that it forces Ukraine to drive the reform agenda. Like every day is the last day. It's vital for us to do it throughout the war. It was the initial, energy behind applying for EU membership, that we wanted to secure every transition and transformation we managed to accomplish since the Revolution of Dignity. So we also see a window of opportunity for enlargement, which has been endorsed by the leaders. And that brings me to a key message, that the procedures should follow the political and historical and geopolitical guidance, not on the opposite. I see that there's sometimes needed to adjust. So, but it's just the same as in the army. You have a fully capable, ready to deliver, proceed further with the accession process, and we cannot sit and wait for the post officer from European Commission to come up to Ukraine once a year saying what's to be done. This should be a dynamic process. In fact, again, we're in a 21st century where the technologies are advanced, when it's developed, when the artificial intelligence is giving a lot of opportunities for Ukraine to move faster. And in fact, I saw Mike McFall, and he helped us to work with some of the companies who help us to move faster. So the process should adjust to the momentum, not the opposite.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very clear message to Brussels. And if I may come to you, Gabriel Landsbergis, you've had the experience, of course, of being a candidate in an accession country. Would you agree with what Olga Stefanishyna just said, that it needs to be done differently and much more dynamically?
So this is the first time when we are actually talking as a member of EU about the enlargement. We usually used to talk about the enlargement from the perspective as a friends from Ukraine or Georgia are talking right now. So our experience. And I was trying to think, how did we manage the transition, the transformation, and what pressed us. We understand what presses Georgia right now. We understand what presses Ukraine very, very well, under enormous duress to push on with the reforms. But what was behind our back that pushed us forward? And I remember the phrase that we used to repeat on and on, that Lithuania is not joining the European family, but is returning to. And this is the cultural deep understanding that is in our DNA, that we were turned out twice from Europe to join something else, something different, something against our will. and we will to go back. That's this integral understanding why we need to go back. And this was the process that pushed us forward. And, you know, with the reform, because they were grueling, even without the war, even without the lost territories, it is grueling. So you have to really explain to yourself, explain to your people why it is needed. And we managed. And obviously, and we're back. with all the force that the country of 2.8 million can muster, and we're very happy that we're back, and we really don't want you know, to have one more Independence Day, you know, that would again be needed for our country, and therefore again now we as a country and as a, you know, as a region, probably even going further, we stand so firmly behind those countries also aspiring to return to their cultural and natural community that they truly belong to.
And a comment on the process?
The process of...
do you think, that, to put it crudely, do you think the Commission is being much too bureaucratic and you know, the 167 tick boxes meet all the 10,000 pages of the acquis communautaire, and then maybe one day we'll let you in?
There is a point in this. I mean, you know, first of all, what you said at the beginning, that we need a reform of the institutions, that's not necessary. The Lisbon Treaty provides us the ability to enlarge. The documents are there. There might be needed some tweaks, there might be needed some adjustments, amendments, whatever, but this should not be a major obstacle. We can enlarge and we should enlarge. Now when it comes to the whole process, it is there for a reason. And the point that what I was trying to make, that it's possible to make those steps to overcome those, you know, grueling processes. It is possible to do that. It's not about the administrative process, it's more about political process. What Olha is saying is, if we allow ourselves to be overburdened from Brussels side, on Brussels side, overburdened by the processes, that's a geopolitical mistake of greater scale.
Thank you very much. Radek Sikorski, Poland and you personally have been amongst the very strongest supporters of Ukraine from the very beginning. But in the last few months, we've started to see some tensions, the farmers, the truckers, for example, in Poland. So tell us a bit more about how you manage that process of keeping that extraordinary Polish support for Ukraine, which is, by the way, one of the very few things on which almost all parties in Polish politics can agree since 1989, while at the same time managing those concerns that are coming from being a neighbor.
I'll come to that, but I'd like you to know that I was also the first NATO defense minister to visit Georgia. And therefore, as a friend of Georgia, I'd like you, Madam President, to know that we remember that this conference used to be attended by your predecessor, President Saakashvili, and that to many of us, he's a symbol of the modernization of Georgia. And we respect your rule of law, but we also think that his treatment is very important. It's very important that he be treated fairly, and perhaps you could contribute to his release. It would be, those who wish Georgia well would welcome it. As regards Ukraine, you're quite right. Poland received over 1 million refugees without a refugee camp into our homes. And we support strategically Ukraine. There is a sort of competition about who does the most. Our German allies say that they contribute the most. In absolute numbers, the Baltic states claim that they support militarily per capita in the greatest amounts. We claim that if you add up the help to refugees, the military stuff and the financial stuff, we do the most on per capita basis, which is a noble competition. But yes, we do have these two niggling problems to do with grain and to do with trucking. And the Deputy Prime Minister and I literally, just before walking in here, discussed this. And this is difficult because it's structural. When we decided to make Ukraine a candidate, and then we decided to open negotiations, I thought that these will be the most difficult things to negotiate, and that there would be quotas and there would be transition periods. Instead of which, out of sympathy with Ukraine and under urgent pressure of events, and the spirit was correct, we have induced those two areas, essentially admitted Ukraine into the single market without any negotiations, without any conditions, and without a transition period, and without Ukraine having to fulfill the normal criteria of standards of these trucks and the use of pesticides and so on. And the country that is paying the most immediate price of pan-European solidarity, which in general, I support. And the two particular Polish professions that pay the brunt are the farmers and the truckers. And we need to solve this so as not to cloud the overall picture of great Polish solidarity with Ukraine. And there is a solution on the horizon to both of them, which is Ukraine's victory in the Black Sea. The reason why the trucking is so vital is that Ukraine wasn't able to export its goods via the sea, and the same for grain. If we really and truly recover the control by Ukraine of Western Black Sea, it will also help to address these issues.
Thanks very much, Radek. Olga, would you like to continue your conversation with Radek on stage?
Yes, but we discussed with minister in details, and there's one thing which is for clear, and this is a major message on our side: we have to solve it. Like, there are legitimate messages on both sides. I think that the major contribution in resolving these issues has been done by Ukraine, because we secured the Black Sea, and now the grain is easily releasable through the Black Sea. We also have done our steps that we ensured the control of exports to neighboring countries. So there are some steps done, but we have to solve it, and I think we all have commitment to do this, because at the same time we really need to reinvent. We need not only to fight for our independence, but we also have to reinvent ourselves and our nations as part of the bigger union. And it's a different task. It's totally different task. And the discussion we have now on grain is part of this task right now. So it's really about mature dialogue, but we have to solve it, and we have no other option, and we'll do it.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very important statement from you both. Emmanuel Bon, the French position on enlargement has, over the last 30 years, seen a remarkable evolution. I mean, to put it delicately, it would be fair to say that France was not, in the 1990s and 2000s, the most enthusiastic supporter of eastward enlargement. But just in the last couple of years, led by Emmanuel Macron, France has actually become a very emphatic supporter of enlargement. And interestingly, in a recent bit of polling by the EU Opinions outfit of the Bertelsmann Foundation, French public opinion is more in favor of Ukrainian membership of the EU than German public opinion. In Germany, it's 52 to 48 against. In France, it's 57% for. So if you could say a word about that transformation, but also about the question of what reforms of the EU itself you see as necessary to enable enlargement.
Thank you, Timothy. No, it's perfectly right. And the starting point for us as French, but probably even more for President Macron, is that the European Union is about substance. It is about, an ever closer union, as the treaties stipulate. And the reason why probably our position has so much changed on enlargement is that we believe today that enlargement can help the Union be stronger. And we believe that, in the debate between enlargement and the deepening of the Union, there are certainly things that we need to do in substance, which basically help us collectively accelerate our project of an ever closer union. And why do we need this ever closer union is pretty simple, is that if we want to remain relevant as Europeans in the European Union and beyond the borders of the European Union, then we have to be more able to act together, to make ourselves respected by, other players on the international stage, to be able to develop kind of more structural policies like those mentioned by President Zouabichvili about energy, defense, and you can think of a whole set of issues which are of obviously common concern or interest at the continental scale. Take migrations, take, for example, technologies, industries, and so many things that we can put in common without even asking about the question of membership. So obviously what we have promised Ukraine, Georgia, and others is membership in the European Union, and we are very serious about this. And the reason we are is that we can build on their experience, and we have a genuine interest in having them with us to develop the kind of, ambitions I mentioned. So how do we make this realistic is a difficult question, because as it was said by some, historically the Union was built on a single market, and it's not that, outsiders have necessarily a right to join. It is also that they have to contribute to this project of a closer union, and they have to contribute to this idea that Europe will be stronger, that we'll be stronger together. So we have to think, in substance about the policies that we can drive together. We have to make sure that we develop tailor-made kind of approaches for every country which is a candidate. There is no one-fits-all policy. You mentioned the methodology of the enlargement. We have changed this to make the procedure more relevant and avoid the kind of, endless discussion that we traditionally have about chapters and the compliance of this candidate or that candidate on every point of the playbook. But anyway, we cannot just ignore, technical realities, etc. So let us work on, things which basically help candidates go into the right direction. And also beyond the EU, let us think of new kind of cooperation schemes we can develop. The President proposed that we initiate a kind of a broader discussion within the European political community. This is happening at the moment. We already had 3 sessions. We need to see how we make the conversation more relevant, more fruitful, etc. But this instrument, for example, can be very helpful to drive everybody into the same directions, address the concerns of Georgia. Ukraine, obviously, we have to build on their experience. And as the minister very rightly said, the contribution, the inspiration we get from Ukraine is important. But think of the Balkans as well. We cannot let the Balkans off the hook, if I may say, because it's not only that they have a right to join the Union, it is also that we cannot let them, open to influences which are not in the interest of the Europeans at the moment.
Just a quick follow-up on that. Someone has counted that there are 144 veto points in the process of accession as currently constructed. Multiple opportunities for vetoes, and we have at least one Prime Minister of a member state who's quite happy to threaten to veto. To what extent do you think, Emmanuel Bon, that getting more qualified majority voting is a precondition for stages of enlargement, or do you think we're over-fixated on that one particular institutional issue? Yeah, and then I'll come to Reddy.
No, I think you're right. Again, the political limit is that changing the treaties would be, first, very painful, and second, not necessarily very realistic. So we have to work within the context of what we have. actual treaties and how we operate better in the European Council, which means indeed that we have to explore the possibility, and we have this possibility for real, to extend qualified majorities to new issues and new debates, and probably we can do better with this. But it's not only about this, it is also about the format of the Commission, how we make the Commission more, political, more able to produce decisions, how we make also the European Council more functional, and how we basically think of a union which is able to incorporate not one, not two, but maybe 5, maybe 10 new members, and still be relevant, be able to produce decisions which are directly in the interest of the people. And this is a very important point, that we keep the public opinion, we keep our peoples with us. It starts with Ukraine, obviously. You mentioned the truckers and the peasants, etc. But I mean, a condition for us to continue supporting Ukraine and doing better in the field is that indeed we retain this kind of support. So we have to demonstrate our people that all we are doing in favor of Ukraine, enlargement, a better Europe, is directly in their interest.
Thank you very much. I'm going to come to the audience in just 1 minute. Radek, you wanted to jump in on that.
I think veto will stay in the area of enlargement forever, actually. The Prime Minister that you mentioned is making a very good argument for dropping it in the area of sanctions. And I'm personally, and my political group, EPP, and the Polish delegation in the European Parliament is persuaded that in the area of sanctions, it shouldn't be autonomous. So we are discussing about where unanimity makes sense and where perhaps we could drop it. But the discussion will be fruitful if we, A, remember the history of this issue, and B, we're creative about it. So let's remember that before Lisbon, we had the Nice system, under which Poland, for example, had only one voice less than France or Germany in the Council, 1 vote less. Okay? We now have double majority. Double majority means that France and Germany acting together can very easily marshal a blocking minority, and it's almost impossible for anybody else to marshal a blocking minority. So what is the subject at hand is where we should consider it, and then what does non-unanimity mean? And non-unanimity doesn't have to mean the current double majority. It can mean 1 member, 1 vote. It can mean very large countries having 3 votes, smaller countries, smaller number of votes. The European Parliament proposed 4/5 majority, which is non-unanimity. We need a fair system that would fairly reflect the wishes of Europeans and would not give anybody an undue advantage.
Thanks very much. New thinking needed. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand. If you would just wait for the microphone, identify yourself, and for preference, questions rather than statements. Over here, Natalie Tocci first, and then a microphone going right over there.
I wanted to stick actually with this point concerning unanimity, and in particular unanimity within the enlargement process. And I think, Radek, you're absolutely right. Of course, when it comes to accepting a new member in the European Union, this is a treaty change, there's no way about this, right? However, coming back to Tim's point, there is nothing in the treaty that obliges us to have unanimity for the opening and closing of every accession negotiation chapter. In fact, it is something that was introduced rather recently, pushed very much by France. So I'm wondering if that procedure basically can be changed, and if perhaps France can lead the way in terms of mustering consensus within the Union now to changing that procedure.
Thank you very much. Emmanuel, a case for French leadership.
Well, I think it's not on, all this basically raises very important fundamental questions. And so, the accession process is not only about conditionalities and technicalities. The way the European Council is not only about how you count votes, it's very much about how you basically build kind of a common interest. So indeed, if we have clarity about what we want for our union, we can certainly relax these kind of rules, and we can explore, better procedures and ways of doing business among ourselves. But then the key point is that you retain the kind of solid consensus that we need among European partners to basically build another Europe, which will be both deeper and enlarged. And we'll not be able to do this if we do not agree on the kind of core questions that we have to ask ourselves. And the debate is ongoing, and I cannot say that, we are all ready to go into the same direction. Brexit already happened. I cannot exclude that another European member of the EU at a point will leave the EU. And so we have to work with Europe with different circles, which is an old French idea. And probably the rules to which you refer, reflect this idea that we had initially, that you need to have a very integrated Europe and partners around who have a vocation to join but can operate in another context. No, again, before thinking of changing the rules, we have to recreate a kind of a clear sense of direction and make sure that we are able to pull everybody into the same direction. I think this is the right orders of questions we have to ask ourselves.
Thank you very much. I think we've got so many questions. I'm going to group a few questions and then come back to the panel. So over here, and if we have a microphone for this lady here afterwards.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. My name is Gunter Kriechbaum. I'm spokesman of the Christian Democratic Party in the German Bundestag. I have a question to Monsieur Bonn and to Mr. Sikorski. We have to observe since a long time that the country, which is already member in European Union, is blackmailing almost and always the neighbor countries for bilateral reasons. We had to observe it also in the case of Northern Macedonia last time, and only for bilateral reasons. Could you imagine to find a mechanism in the European Council to qualify a dispute with a majority, qualified majority or another sense of majority, to qualify this dispute, if it is a bilateral one, then to open the way to an arbitration court, or if it is really a European one. And this question has to be decided with a majority. And if it is really a European one, then it has to be decided on the European level. Otherwise, we will not solve these blockades. And this, I think, could be a path to solve a problem which we have to observe since a very long time.
Thank you very much. That's such a pertinent question. I think I'll go straight to you, if I may, Emmanuel, and then Radek to give a quick response.
No, I think the question is not only important, but very relevant in the sense that it reflects a reality in the EU today that part of the members or part of partners basically consider the EU as an international organization in which you have certain rights and you are entitled to draw certain benefits from your membership. And so those ones are probably less hesitant to indeed blackmail the others or basically, leverage all the kind of influence they can have through procedures to maximize their bilateral interest, which is not necessarily acceptable in the vision of others like France, who again fundamentally believe that the union is a political project. And this is a debate that we need to have. I mean, we will continue to strongly argue that enlargement is to the benefit of a deeper union, but in this context, indeed, we have to explore this kind of rules. And those who are not able to play by those rules probably need to work within another context than the one we want for our union, which is, again, able to incorporate a better collective interest.
Thank you. Radek, did you want to comment briefly on that?
The problem is real, but these games are played not only in the context of enlargement. Yeah. They are played in all contexts. and countries use excuses, countries hide behind other countries. You know what happens. We do need solutions. I'm not sure your ones would work because people would then have pretexts on supposedly European issues. We in Poland haven't yet had our internal discussion about what our attitude to the various reform proposals are, but we will, and then I'll be ready for a discussion with our German allies.
Thanks very much. I'm going to take 2 or 3 last questions. First of all, this lady here.
Thank you very much, Maria Tadeo, correspondent. The French president is not here, but Emmanuel, you are. So 2 days ago, he gave a press conference in which he said, or talked about regime. He said that Russia has now entered a stage that is more dangerous, more aggressive, harsher. This has been interpreted, and there has been a lot of commentary that this is a departure from the language previously from the president. It may lead to a new doctrine, that this is something new. Can you tell us what the thinking is in Paris, and will this lead to something new, perhaps?
If you'd like to hold that for a moment, and we'll take a couple more. There was a gentleman here. If we could have a microphone over there, and then near the back there.
Thank you. Michael Gahler from the European Parliament. I'm happy to see former colleagues on the center stage. On the voting mode, I hear interesting discussions from candidate sources who say, well, when I follow these debates on unanimity or qualified majority voting, for my country, I need EU membership first and not the veto on foreign affairs issues. So if I had to choose, I would even in the accession treaty subscribe, I'm not using this veto if your argument is we cannot enlarge because there are additional veto comers, so to say. So that my question in this regard, wouldn't that be a way on the one hand to allow countries who accede to renounce with the accession treaty, to renounce the right for a veto in specific areas, and those countries, and we have big ones who are in favor of QMV and small ones in favor, and the other way around. And all those who are already inside, that they unilaterally say, I renounce this vote, which doesn't make me powerless, because the only thing I have to organize is a qualified minority to get my position through. So more creativity is my question in this regard. Making use of pastoral clauses, all fine, but I think such discussions that are positive in candidate countries should be taken up and used constructively. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If we get a microphone to the gentleman on the aisle there.
Rika Josviak, journalist, Radio Free Europe. I feel we're skirting around this topic a bit about vetoes, but I'd like to have a clear answer, please, here. Do you need unanimity or not to get rid of the unanimity rule when it comes to opening, closing chapters and interim chapters? I think we owe our Georgian and Ukrainian friends a clear answer on that. Passerelle clauses or not. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've got 5 more minutes. We have 5 speakers, so each speaker now has 1 minute in which to respond to questions and say anything else they'd like to say. If I could start at the other end, we'll go in reverse order.
Well, just to answer the question, I think what the president meant is that we have seen a level of Russian aggressivity over 2 years, which has only increased. And not only against Ukraine, obviously, but against us also very directly. We had a ministerial Weimar meeting recently, and we disclosed with our Polish and German friends, some of the activities, disinformation, cyber activities that Russia is developing directly against us in our public opinion, in the cyberspace. So this is an element which basically leads us to the conclusion that what we said at the very beginning of the war of aggression, that Ukraine in a sense will fight with our support, has to be revisited because, the political value of what is happening in Ukraine today has changed in the sense that a lot of the European destiny is incorporated in what is happening today, and therefore the Ukrainians are are making. So that's why, basically, in a nutshell, the message of the president was that we have to acknowledge that the Russian threat is also for us, and we have to be up to this fight. And the indictment of the Estonian prime minister by a Russian prosecutor is another evidence of this, and there are probably many other examples I could cite.
Thanks very much. Ready.
I don't have a view yet on where unanimity should come in the enlargement process, in the negotiations of the enlargement process. But Michael, if you remember, we had a view in the discussion on the conference on the future of Europe about how unanimity could work in the area of defense. If we have this rapid reaction force, and we should, if memory serves, the idea was that a decision to use it in the Council would be taken unanimously, but then the management or the extension of the mission could be done by a majority vote. That sounded to me like a sensible compromise.
Thanks.
Well, when it comes to enlargement unanimity, I think that there are options, for example, to combine the votes, so that we would not have a daunting task of 140 plus votes of unanimity in front of us, but if they're bundled together, so they're more clear and more important, and I think less fragile. So that means that we would have less pressure on them, because everybody would be focused on them and very well understood what is going to happen. Secondly, the unanimity is being weaponized, and we're seeing that. And you mentioned a couple of cases, but there are additional ones, such as Schengen, against certain countries who would like to join Schengen zone. They're unable. And I think that if we will be seeing more and more of that, the frustration alone will push us to adopt certain amendments and get closer to the qualified majority rather than stick to unanimity. We will get there, because if we weaponize it, there will have to be an answer.
Thanks very much. Olga.
Probably just two messages on my side, as I'm the person who really digged into the negotiations, and I mean, with all the technicalities. Thank you, France, for the methodology of enlargement. There are a lot of interesting things to see, but probably a couple of messages on my side. First, in fact, it's Ukraine and the support of the member states to grant Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova a membership perspective, which basically unpacked the enlargement and made it real. So it has become real not so long ago. And definitely next European Commission, after the elections, whatever the composition of that commission would be the Commission of Enlargement. And everything which would feed the purpose of making it successful should be done. And there's so much focus on unanimity and the decision-making process. In fact, enlargement procedures should be filtered, and should be filtered from the perspective that a number of decisions taken by the member states at different levels should be cut. In fact, why would member states decide whether open the negotiations in a specific area or not, if it's a technical process while the political decision has been taken? Okay, why would there be legal obligation to set preconditions for starting something? A legal preconditions to start talking to member states to start something. So this is the legal format. It's not possible at all. So Ukraine has to invent another rule of law reforms just to be able to start talking about possibility to start something. You know, we cannot reinvent everything we've already done. So it should be seriously filtered to feed the purpose and the momentum of enlargement. And I feel that basically if there any historical period we can compare ourselves is the beginning of 2000s, There was a strategic geopolitical decision that Europe will become broader. It wasn't an easy process for Lithuania, for Poland. We know it as well. Thank you for the expertise you share, and the procedures should adjust. And basically, it's not about unanimity can help in the decisions where it is needed to have a decision at the level of the member states. But it's not necessarily needed. And probably second very short thing on my side, the first thing I heard from my president when we were granted the candidate status, we had a follow-up meeting next day, right? And he said, we should use this momentum to accomplish every possible transformation in this country while the war is raging on. Because after the victory, we would have totally different agenda. That's what EU is for us. And everything we can do to feed this purpose, to make the reforms in Ukraine happen, will work. And it is what is merit-based. We are capable to deliver, we will deliver, and we hope the system will be able to adjust to that.
Thank you very much. President Zurabishvili, you have the last word.
Yeah, I'll share that it's a momentum for change. What I want to say is that after listening to you, I'm confident that somewhere you will find the imagination, the creativity to solve the issues that are very real issues of unanimity, procedures, what is first and what is last. But what I want to say is that enlargement for us is existential. It's not a question of procedure, a question of liking or not liking. There is no choice. And what I want to share with you is that enlargement for you too is existential today. Because if you take the global picture, you see what I think that sometimes we tend to forget, that not only Russia has invaded Ukraine and is threatening all of our countries with cyber attacks, with hybrid warfare, but it's now going to anti-satellite warfare, which might threaten communications and the whole logistic of our countries. So I think that there has to be some fuel into the imagination that is put to solve these issues. We should do more internally, and I'm talking for Georgia, to speed up the reforms, but nothing will change the fact that we together have no other alternative but to be together, to be united, to be more democratic, and to stand up to what is today an alliance of autocracies that are fueling terrorism, cyber attacks. Every threat that is coming from the same direction. So let's look at this picture, which is for Munich, I think, the picture that we need to see so that we do not hide behind some comfort.
Thank you for that splendid last word. 3 conclusions. First of all, we need a more dynamic, flexible, imaginative and urgent way of doing this. Secondly, the discussion about enlargement is not just about enlargement, it's about the entire future of the EU, what the EU is going to be and wants to be. And thirdly, and this I think is so interesting, it is inseparable from the outcome of the war. I mean, the discussion about Ukrainian grain showed that, and your remarks about the Black Sea, including the Black Sea. So it does come back to the question which has been the dominant theme of this Munich Security Conference. Please join me in thanking our speakers for an excellent discussion.